Diamond P Sports presents championship drag racing from the National Hot Rod Association. The Big Bud Shootout, featuring a showdown between 8 of the finest fiberglass-bodied funny cars. Driven by 8 of the best drivers in the world that thread the needle through the quarter-mile racetrack at speeds topping 250 miles an hour, with elapsed times of less than 6 seconds. The Big Bud Shootout.
Hello, everybody. I'm Dave McClellan. We're at Indianapolis Raceway Park, and we're right in Race Control Central getting ready for the running of the Big Bud Shootout. A $25,000 top prize has been posted, and we have the 8 best funny cars in the world. Throughout this entire season, all of the funny cars at NHRA national events have been competing for qualifying points to earn the right to race today in the Big Bud Shootout. The funny car is a 2,500 horsepower fiberglass-bodied crowd pleaser. To learn more about it, let's go to Steve Evans.
The funny car was born the day the first racer figured out that if he moved the rear axle closer to the front axle, shortening the wheelbase, he'd get better traction. It worked, too. But the fans in the stand said, boy, those are funny cars. And they did funny things, too, like pick up the front wheels every time they left the starting line. Along came bigger engines, superchargers, fuel injection. As the cars went faster, the crowds got bigger. Then Detroit, always quick to discover a good thing, said, let's put some of our bodies on these machines. Maybe it'll help sell cars. The racers said, nah, they're too heavy. Make them out of fiberglass, and we'll use them. The National Hot Rod Association, befitting the other eliminator categories, decided to call it experimental stock. But the fans wanted funny cars. And David, its funny cars will all get today in the Big Bud Shootout.
And we've got the best in the country. All season long, these drivers have been qualifying at a 16-car field. The number 1 qualifier would earn 175 points, while the number 16 qualifier would earn 85. These points were totaled, and these are the drivers in the Big Bud Shootout. Mark Oswald, number 1. Number 7 and 8, Kenny Bernstein and Al Segrini, they just barely made it, just earning the right a couple of weeks ago at the recent North Star National. And here is Al Segrini, the engine getting started for the first race of the day in the Big Bud Shootout. These fiberglass funny cars utilizing a replica body of a late model American car with 2,500 horsepower engines powered by a blend of nitromethane and alcohol, supercharged and fuel injected. And you see Al Segrini tight inside that tubular roll cage, and the wheelie bars on the back of the car designed to keep the front wheels on the ground as they leave the starting line. Don Prudhomme, one of the most famous racers of all time, against Segrini here in this first round race of the Big Bud Shootout. Segrini qualified 8th in this program, just barely making the field, as we told you a few short weeks ago, while Don Prudhomme, with 1,105 points, qualified in the number 4 position. The burnout procedure designed to heat those huge tires, the rubber actually working better the hotter it becomes. Al Segrini has got to be considered the underdog based on qualifying points, and earlier Steve Evans had a chance to visit with Segrini.
In the background, I can hear Don Prudhomme. He has restarted his car. What's going on over there, do you think?
Well, I mean, Don, you know, he's a perfectionist, and he's a true competitor, and he's over there, and he doesn't like the way it sounds. I'm hoping he'll fool it a little more and maybe dial that 585 away.
A lot of people are picking you over the Snake.
Well, I hope so. Well, you know, we've been consistent. Snake's run a 599, and he ran that 585. Both of our runs have been right there. We run 250, so we'll be there.
We went over to Don Prudhomme's pit area to watch the conclusion of that second warm-up. Steve then chatted with the man they call the Snake.
Don, you warmed the car up a couple of times this morning. Everything okay?
Yeah, it seems to be. You know, it's a new day, and we're just adjusting for the air and trying to get enough temperature in it and see if it takes the throttle right, and so far it seems all right.
You've got a performance advantage on paper anyway in time trials over Segrini.
Yeah, just the main thing we're battling here is consistency. You know, the car needs to run consistent and keep repeating itself. Segrini's run more quick relapse times than we have consistently, and that's what we're going to be battling. We hope that we can keep on into the 580 bracket to win the event.
On the starting line for the first race in the first round of the Big Bud Shootout, $25,000 top prize at stake. Don Prudhomme in the far lane, Al Segrini in the near lane, and Segrini with a big advantage off the starting line. And at the finish line, he extends it. Al Segrini wins the race, and Don Prudhomme's crew very, very disappointed. 5.93 the elapsed time. His speed, 244 miles an hour. As we watch again, Al Segrini took advantage of Don Prudhomme from the moment the Christmas tree went green. Segrini moving ahead at the very start of the race, and from that point on, there was no catching the Easton, Massachusetts flash as Al Segrini headed to the end of the quarter mile with a definite advantage over Don Prudhomme. So there you have your first winner in the first round of the Big Bud Shootout. It is Al Segrini.
Well, Al Segrini left first and led Don Prudhomme wire to wire with a 5.93, Al.
Oh, great, great. I'm telling you, well, I tell you, we just want to be consistent and just keep running. Run 93 yesterday. Repeat. I'm very happy the car didn't shake. It ran really good.
You must hold your breath hoping those tires don't smoke when you don't have lane choice like that.
Yeah, well, it spun them on the dry, but it was awesome. Like, you know, that's the way I like it. It had a lot of power, but it spun them, and Craig indicated that it was spreading them a little bit. So I took a little long and got a little more heat in it. Hopefully it would, you know, it hold this time. It held.
So that dry burnout is kind of a preview for you.
Yeah, well, it tells the driver if it'll take all the power, how to, you know, apply the throttle, whether they really stand on it or just kind of, you know, drive it to the store.
Good luck round two.
Thank you.
Al referring to Craig Berry, one of his crewmen. The Big Bud Shootout is being brought to you by Budweiser, the king of beers and proud sponsor of the U.S. Olympic team. For all you do, this Bud's for you. Kenny Bernstein takes on world champion Frank Hawley next on the Big Bud Shootout. The Big Bud Shootout, the 8 best funny cars in the world taking dead aim on that $25,000 top prize. The defending champion, Frank Hawley in the Chi-Town Hustler, the engine coming to life. While we were away, there was some confusion over who was going to run in this near lane. The number 3 qualifier, Hawley, has the lane choice. He selected the near lane, leaving his competition, Kenny Bernstein, the number 7 qualifier, in the far lane. Actually, this race is a rematch of the finals of the North Star Nationals just a couple of weeks ago when Frank Hawley, who is the defending Big Bud Shootout champion, met Kenny Bernstein at Brainerd, Minnesota for all the honors at the North Star Nationals. Bernstein qualified 7th, just made it at the North Star Nationals in qualifying, while Frank Hawley, the reigning world champion, easily qualified in the number 3 spot. But at the North Star Nationals, in that finals just 2 short weeks ago, Kenny Bernstein in the near lane against Frank Hawley in the Chi-Town Hustler in the far lane. A green light on both lanes, and Kenny Bernstein, by a few feet, takes home the win. Steve had a chance to talk to Frank Hawley about that loss.
The last time we saw this man, Kenny Bernstein, was in the final round of the North Star Nationals. He was a car length ahead of this man, the world champion, the defending Big Bud champion, Frank Hawley. You going to let him do that to you again?
Well, I didn't think we were going to let him do that to us at the North Star Nationals, but it just turned out like that. We left the starting line. I left a little bit first. Gosh, halfway down, I saw a red car, and it just stayed like that for the whole race. So we're not really vengeful, but we don't plan on that happening again.
This is an entirely new race day in the near lane. It is the Chi-Town Hustler with Frank Hawley, the defending champion in the Big Bud Shootout. Kenny Bernstein in the far lane, and what a drag race. And just at the finish line, Kenny Bernstein pulls it out. Look at the times. 5.90 at over 251 miles an hour. One of the fastest times ever by a funny car. As both cars leave the starting line together, you see the front wheels just dancing off the pavement. Those huge rear slicks grabbing the asphalt for traction. Look at the lead by Frank Hawley just off the starting line. But at the middle of the track, here comes Bernstein in his move. He is moving towards the finish line, pulling ahead, and there, just by a few feet, Kenny Bernstein defeats the defending champion in an upset.
Kenny Bernstein comes from behind at a sensational 251 miles an hour. The cap is blown off the magneto. The blower belt is gone. Kenny Bernstein had the hammer down, pushing the throttle through the bell housing to get around Frank Hawley. And I'm not even sure if he knows he won. You did. an absolute repeat of the last time these two fellows met, the North Star Nationals in Brainerd, Minnesota. He was out on you a little bit, and from behind, you came like a rocket.
Yeah, he did. He left on me a little. He got me, and then it just started hauling. I kept watching him, and then he started to disappear, and then all of a sudden she exploded. The blower belt came off, and boom, and I didn't know if I won because right then was when I thought I got around him.
251, the fastest you've ever been.
Fastest we've ever been. That's it. Good. It's nice, but we got some damage. I'm a little worried now.
Kenny Bernstein, the man that just barely made the field, puts the defending champion out in round number 1. The favorite in this race is in the near lane. That's Ken Veeney. He is matched against John Force. Veeney from Wadsworth, Ohio, qualified second. 1,195 points to John Force from California. He's the number 6 qualifier, 950 points. Both cars capable of running over 250 miles an hour. All eyes on the starting line in the Christmas tree, and a great start, but John Force with a big lead. He is continuing to extend it, and John Force easily wins another upset as the number 2 qualifier goes out. Force wins it at 5.87 seconds at 247 miles an hour. You know upset has to be on the mind of this lady. Her husband, Mark Oswald, is the number 1 qualifier driving this car. The Candies and Hughes entry out of Houma, Louisiana. In the 3 races we've seen thus far, it's all been upset. The number 1 qualifier has got to face the number 5 qualifier, Tommy Anderson. Can he upset Mark Oswald? One of the men that lost, the defending Big Bud Shootout champion, Frank Hawley.
Well, Frank Hawley, you did your job. You were out on Kenny about 0.04 of a second, much as you were the last time you two met.
Yeah, well, that was a little more, but it doesn't seem to matter a lot if you lose. Those guys have been running real good. There was a big discrepancy over lane choice. We changed, and it spun and shook the tires pretty good.
But you were ahead of him most of the way. When did you first see him?
The last mile-an-hour light. And he'd come by us real hard, and I figured there was a chance that he had caught us, but I wasn't real sure until I saw you guys run over to him. But I didn't see him until after the finish line.
You can't ask for better drag racing than that when you guys aren't even sure who won.
That's a good drag race.
And obviously disappointed Frank Hawley, the defending Big Bud Shootout champion, out in the first round of competition. Our number 1 qualifier, Mark Oswald's in the near lane. Tommy Anderson, the number 5 qualifier with 1,105 points, driving for Jim Ouimet and Alan Aronek, will be racing in the far lane. Mark Oswald for Candies and Hughes, qualified number 1, a staggering 1,265 points. The burnouts are completed, and now the concentration of the drivers will be on that electronic device standing in the center of the racetrack. It's called a Christmas tree, and it is designed to give an equal start to both drivers. The yellow light will flash for 0.4 of a second, and then the green light, and then both drivers leave. Tommy Anderson losing a bit of control. That gives an advantage to Mark Oswald, and the number 1 qualifier records the low elapsed time of round number 1 racing, 5.86 seconds at over 250 miles an hour. The pairings for round number 2, Mark Oswald with lane choice over Kenny Bernstein, and John Force will race Al Segrini. Let's go back to the pits and join Steve Evans.
This is what a supercharger pulley, the bottom pulley, is supposed to look like. Here you see Kenny Bernstein holding what is left of the bottom pulley on his car. At over 251 miles an hour, the RPM just exploded it.
Well, that's what happened, exactly. It was going so fast, spinning so hard, it just disintegrated it, exactly.
So it's really good news in a way, because what caused everything else was the blower belt slinging around.
Well, the blower belt came off, and the pulley also punctured an oil line, which threw oil all over the car, so it's not as bad as we thought. The only major damage is this.
And a little body damage. Your guys are pop riveting that back together.
Well, we got to put some fiberglass back together. Magneto blew the cap off of it, but we got a magneto to go in it. But, you know, it's good news. This isn't supposed to happen. It could happen early in the race and you'd lose. It just happened at the right time.
Go get them.
Okay.
As Kenny Bernstein's crew continues to work, we're getting ready for the semifinals of the Big Bud Shootout. Big Bud Shootout at Indianapolis Raceway Park. I'm Dave McClelland along with Steve Evans, and we're ready for the semifinal round. This man, Mark Oswald, in his driving suit now, just a few moments ago, was hard at work.
Not too many years ago, you only took one of these drag racing engines apart if you thought something was wrong with it. You prided yourself on saying, never took the heads off all day. But there's too much at stake now. Plus, the engines are far better designed. They're really designed to come apart very quickly and go back together quickly. Even though nothing appeared to be wrong with the Candies in his engine, Mark Oswald and crew Tom Cattleman underneath have taken all 8 pistons out of it. They'll replace any that even look marginal, even if it's just a tight piston ring. Tom Cattleman under the car with the oil pan off, checking every one of the bearings, rod bearings and main bearings. what's so incredible is that a complete engine overhaul like this, and that's really what it is done in a matter of 45 minutes. Last time I took my car into a garage for similar service, I got it back in 2 months.
Steve, and you're not even trying to go 250 miles an hour. But these two drivers are Mark Oswald in the near lane, Kenny Bernstein in the far lane. Bernstein, of course, the upset winner over the defending Big Bud Shootout champion. Here in the semifinal round of racing, it's single elimination. There are 4 cars remaining. We started with 8. Mark Oswald came into this field the #1 qualifier, the best performing car in the country, and a great start by both drivers. Oswald losing a little traction. Bernstein moves ahead. He holds on at the finish line in a tremendous drag race. The crew, all the work between rounds pays off. And look at the times. 5.81 seconds at over 256 miles an hour as we watch again a great start for both drivers. The little wisp of smoke out of Mark Oswald's car indicates losing traction ever so slightly. Kenny Bernstein moving ahead in the middle of the track takes every advantage and marks his second upset win.
Coming out of his famed red funny car, Kenny Bernstein. An upset over Mark Oswald. Bernstein goes into the final of the Big Bud Shootout, and he goes in as the fastest driver in the history of funny car racing at over 256 miles an hour. The quickest elapsed time, 5:81.
All right, that's it, huh? How about them numbers? I can't even believe it. What a race it was. He was right there, I know, because I shut off and he went right by me, but it just hauled. It made it from one end to the other. It picked the front end up, it tingled, and then it just went boom, and I go down, and it was just hauling.
The ride of your life.
The fastest ever, I guess. That's beautiful.
Oh, congratulations. And you had a lot of work to do in the pit area, and you got it all done properly up here.
Well, of course. You know, we exploded the pulley like we talked. It ripped the mag off, but Armstrong, Guger, Schumann, the group, the Budweiser King group, they put it together. Bingo, here we are.
Kenny Bernstein in the finals for that $25,000 Big Bud Shootout award will race one of these drivers, Al Segrini in the near lane, or John Force in the far lane. Force from Fullerton, California, a very active racer on the national event circuit, has yet to win a major championship. A very intense racer. Force had a chance to talk with Steve Evans earlier.
Certainly there's a big financial reward, but for you, the reward would be winning one of these big races.
There's no doubt for Budweiser, 25,000 is a drop in the bucket. To me, it's life or death.
No doubt about it, a win of this size would go a long way to providing a big boost for the career of John Force from Fullerton, California. But the man that's trying to stop it is in the near lane of this quarter-mile racetrack, and that is Al Segrini from Easton, Massachusetts. East meets West here in the Big Bud Shootout at Indianapolis Raceway Park. John Force and Al Segrini. And a red light start by John Force. He left the starting line too soon before the green light came on. Al Segrini elects to save his parts and pieces, shuts off and just coasts through at only 116 miles an hour. But in making that choice, he loses the lane choice in the finals to Kenny Bernstein. $25,000 at stake in the Big Bud Shootout. In the far lane, a pair of upset winners, a pair of underdogs made it to the finals. Some 5,000 horsepower on tap between these two cars as they prepare for their burnout. As these two drivers got ready for this final confrontation, Steve Evans had an opportunity to visit their pit areas and talk with both of them.
You could beat yourself going into this final. That's always possible in any drag race.
Well, I think so. The track conditions are not what they were earlier today. We were on the last run, which was a good run. It was on the verge then. Dale Armstrong, my crew chief, feels that it was one of those runs that could have gone either way. It could have been good. It could have been bad. So we're going to have to be real careful in the final not to beat ourselves.
Kenny Bernstein has everyone shaking their heads. In this heat and humidity to run 256.
I tell you, that's unbelievable. That's I'm happy for Kenny. That's a really good pass. I hope someday we can run that quick. But that's really phenomenal. I just keep shaking my head. 250. I ran 250 on Saturday here, and I thought that was flying. 256, just unbelievable.
So what are your guys going to do to combat that kind of performance?
Well, I felt as though the car left really strong in low gear. It would have run maybe a mid-80 or high 80. So I mean, we want to go out there and kind of leave it alone and hopefully go out in the track really good, and we'll give them a good drag race.
For $25,000, you'd sacrifice a few pieces.
Well, what we have to do, we have to do. I mean, like you said, when you're down here, there's no coming back. It's all over. This is the final. We both worked very hard to get here. Kenny did, and the crew did. And they'll do a good job. We'll put it together and let it all hang out in this last run.
Both Kenny Bernstein and Al Segrini just made this Big Bud Shootout 8-car field at the recent Brainerd, Minnesota North Star Nationals. Bernstein qualified number 7. Al Segrini just made it, qualified number 8. In round number 1, Segrini the upset winner over Don Prudhomme. He took the measure of John Force in round 2. But for Kenny Bernstein, what a record-setting day. He defeated the number 1 qualifier, Mark Oswald, in the semifinals. In round number 1, it was the defending champion, Frank Hawley. Now it's the finals, 25,000 at stake, and up in smoke goes Al Segrini. It's Kenny Bernstein, the winner of the Big Bud Shootout. A tremendous display of driving ability. His crew, headed by Dale Armstrong, elated and awesome horsepower. 252 miles an hour, 5.90 seconds. Let's see how he did it. As the green light comes on, both cars leave the starting line. Bernstein very smoothly, but watch Al Segrini. The smoke starts, and then it gets worse, indicating a loss of traction. And at that point, the race is lost, and who knows it? The crew. Jumping for joy, Kenny Bernstein's crew with Dale Armstrong, the crew chief, saying, "We win."
A few weeks ago, Kenny Bernstein was not even qualified for the shootout. Now, he is on the receiving end of a $25,000 check. He did it in record-busting fashion. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you, Steve. What a turnaround, like you said, from a month ago. And I've said it before, and I know it's getting old, but Dale Armstrong, Mike Guger, Rick Schumann, Jeff Scarp, and the Budweiser crew, they just did it, and Dale really put it together.
Let's talk a minute about racing philosophy. You softened up the motor a little bit, didn't overpower the racetrack. You had a feeling Segrini would do just that. You called it.
We were hoping. That was Armstrong's plan of attack, and he's in charge of making those things happen with the race car. We talk about it, and we did. We softened it, and it did da-da cylinder when it left. It went da-da, and I was a little afraid of it. It did it on the burnout, but it picked it up and went on, and it's just history.
Your happiest moment in drag racing?
Top of the list. I can't think of it. It's been a long time coming, I'll tell you, but Brainerd was a good week. I mean, everything went right there, but here we are again, number 1 qualifier and doing this deal. I'm happy, real happy.
You're on a roll, Kenny Bernstein. Congratulations again.
Steve, appreciate it.
Our congratulations to Kenny Bernstein and all the competitors in the Big Bud Shootout, brought to you by Budweiser, the king of beers and proud sponsor of the U.S. Olympic team. For all you do, this Bud's for you. And a presentation of Diamond P Sports.